Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In a quiet little town, Emily Carter was a simple young woman, always cautious and thoughtful. That day, she was going to a wedding, but not her own. By an unlikely twist of fate, a mistake occurred at the church. The young man she was standing with at the end of the aisle, thinking he was celebrating the union of a friend, ended up at the altar beside her. Panic gave way to an impulsive decision. To avoid ridicule, Emily agreed to say yes. She knew nothing about this man, except that he wore an impeccable suit and had a mysteriously charming smile. Moments after the ceremony, as the guests were dispersing, she was stunned to discover that this stranger was none other than Alexander Blackwood, a world-famous billionaire CEO, renowned for his rigor and ruthless success in the business world. Emily felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and disbelief. She had just gotten married by chance, to a man whose name the whole world knew. And what at first seemed like an accident could turn into the beginning of an adventure she could never have imagined. Emily woke up the next morning with a slight headache and a feeling of unreality. The previous day had seemed surreal. She had said yes to a stranger, and it wasn't just any stranger. It was Alexander Blackwood, the man whose affairs covered the front pages of international newspapers and whose name inspired respect and fear. Looking in the mirror, Emily wondered how her life had changed so quickly. She had spent years carefully planning her choices, and now, in a single moment of impulsiveness, she had signed a marriage certificate. Soon after, her phone vibrated with an incoming call. The name on the screen made her shiver. Alexander Blackwood. Hesitantly, she picked up. "Hello, Emily. I guess we have a little problem to take care of," said the man's deep, confident voice. She felt her heart race. Alexander, with his magnetic presence and calm but authoritative tone, seemed completely in control of the situation. Emily answered hesitantly, trying to sound confident. "Hello, yes, I suppose." As the conversation progressed, he explained that he was taking this union seriously, despite the absurd way it had happened. He insisted they meet at his luxurious penthouse to discuss their accidental marriage. Emily spent the day imagining how she would present herself to a man whose wealth and influence were almost legendary. She couldn't help but feel a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. This unexpected marriage would turn her life upside down in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. That evening, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit, Emily headed to Blackwood's penthouse, ready to confront the billionaire and find out if this chance incident could really become the beginning of something, or the worst nightmare of her life. Emily felt her heart pound as she rang the massive doorbell of Alexander's penthouse. Every footstep echoed in the luxurious lobby, and she wondered how she was going to hold a conversation with a man she only knew from newspapers and social media. The door opened before she could even knock. Alexander stood there, immaculate in his dark suit, his hair perfectly styled, and that penetrating gaze that seemed to read her thoughts. "Emily," he said simply, with a slight smile that didn't completely reassure her. She tried to smile back, but her heart was pounding so hard she could barely speak. Hello. Mr. Blackwood," she stammered. He invited her in, and she was immediately struck by the luxury of the place. Walls adorned with works of art, elegant modern furniture, and a breathtaking view of the illuminated city. Every detail reflected the power and success of the man before her. "Sit down," Alexander said, gesturing to the sofa. He sat down opposite her, his hands clasped, looking both calm and imposing. "I suppose you want to know what happens next?" Emily nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. "Yes. I didn't know you were." She trailed off, unable to finish her sentence. "A billionaire?" Alexander finished with a slightly amused smile. "Yes. And I'm not taking this marriage lightly." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. She immediately understood that, despite the ridiculous situation, Alexander was a determined man. He then suggested they calmly discuss the implications of their union, their expectations, and how they would handle this unexpected situation. As the conversation progressed, Emily realized that this man was not only powerful and wealthy, but also had a worldview, intelligence, and charisma that captivated her in spite of herself. Every word exchanged created a subtle tension between them, a mixture of apprehension and intrigue, which promised that this accidental marriage would turn their lives upside down in unexpected ways. As she left the penthouse that evening, Emily felt her mind plagued by a single thought: this man was going to be impossible to forget. The following days were eerily silent for Emily. She tried to resume her daily routine, but every action seemed to be filtered through the prism of her encounter with Alexander. The articles about him, the rumors about his affairs and his power, everything took on a new, almost intimidating dimension. Then, one morning, her phone buzzed again. It was Alexander. This time, the tone was different, less formal, almost curious. "Emily, I'd like to invite you to dinner. Just to talk, away from the chaos of our respective lives." Emily hesitated. The idea of spending time alone with a man she barely knew and who represented a completely different universe from her own made her uncomfortable, but at the same time, she felt a strange excitement. After a moment of reflection, she agreed. That evening, the restaurant was discreet, elegant, and perfectly chosen by Alexander. He seemed to know every detail to create a comfortable yet exclusive atmosphere. Emily sat down at the table, observing Alexander, who, despite his reputation as a ruthless businessman, wore a genuine smile and an attentive gaze. The conversation began cautiously. They talked about trivialities: the weather, travel, the city. But gradually, the discussion became more personal. Alexander asked her what she liked, her passions, her dreams. Emily, surprised by his sincerity, found herself opening up. Then a comfortable silence fell. Alexander looked at her with an intensity that made Emily blush. "You're different, Emily. And I've never met anyone like you." She looked down, her heart pounding. I don't know what to say," she whispered. But no answer was necessary. In that silence, something had changed. Fear and uncertainty gave way to curiosity mixed with attraction. For the first time since that accidental marriage, Emily felt that this man wasn't just an obstacle or an intimidating figure, but perhaps someone capable of upending her life in unexpected ways. This dinner marked the beginning of a new dynamic, between respect, tension, and latent desire. The sparks of a relationship that defied all expectations began to appear. The weeks following the dinner were a strange mix of fascination and tension for Emily. Alexander continued to contact her regularly, sometimes for light conversations, sometimes to seriously discuss the implications of their accidental marriage. Each interaction left her both excited and nervous. One afternoon, Emily received a message from Alexander offering her a tour of his company. Curious but intimidated, she accepted. She expected a cold and strict environment, but was surprised by the way he introduced her to his colleagues: respectful, professional, almost protective. However, not everything went as planned. During an important meeting, a colleague made an awkward remark about accidental marriage that made her blush and feel humiliated. Alexander, noticing her discomfort, immediately intervened, but Emily felt a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. She felt as if he was controlling every situation to protect her, and this made her feel both secure and frustrated. That evening, as she walked home, she thought back to the scene and to Alexander. Was he too bossy? Or was it simply his billionaire instinct, accustomed to managing every detail? She didn't know what to think anymore. The next day, Alexander invited her for a walk in a park near the city. It was an attempt to lighten the mood and chat more informally. As they walked, Emily tried to express her conflicting feelings: her admiration for him, her fear of getting lost in this unfamiliar world, and her desire to understand this marriage that seemed more and more real. Alexander listened to her attentively, his gaze serious but gentle. "Emily, I don't want to scare you. I know it all happened too quickly. But I am sincere in my intentions. This marriage is not a mere formality for me." These words touched Emily deeply. But as she walked alongside him, she realized that this relationship would be anything but simple. Misunderstandings, social differences, and their own fears would constantly test their bond. Yet despite the tensions, one thing was clear: they were inextricably linked, and neither could easily ignore what was beginning to blossom between them. A few weeks after their walk, Emily felt something was changing between her and Alexander. The messages were more frequent, the calls longer, and the intensity of their budding relationship was evident in every exchange. Yet, a lingering unease persisted, the fear of being overwhelmed by this world of luxury and power that Alexander embodied. One evening, while they were having dinner at Alexander's, a casual conversation took an unexpected turn. Emily discussed her past, her choices, and the sacrifices she had made to lead a simple and independent life. Alexander listened attentively, but when she mentioned her refusal to be guided by anyone else, he frowned slightly. "Emily, I don't want to control you," he said softly, "but I can't help but want to protect you. You're important to me, and I can't bear to see you in danger or uncomfortable." Emily felt a mixture of relief and frustration. "I understand, but I'm not someone who needs constant protection. I want to be by your side as an equal, not as someone to be saved." Silence fell over them, heavy and charged with emotion. Alexander stepped closer, lowered his voice, and said, "I know, but it's hard for me to leave you alone in this world. You're different from anyone I've ever met, Emily, and I care about you in ways I can't easily explain." Emily felt her heart sink. For the first time, she saw behind the impassive billionaire the vulnerable man, genuinely worried about her. She understood that this accidental marriage had awakened real and deep feelings. After a moment, she took his hand and squeezed it gently. "Then maybe we need to get to know each other, for real. Not just as accidental husband and wife, but as human beings." Alexander smiled a rare smile, a mixture of relief and admiration. It was their first truly emotional encounter, one that laid the foundation for a complex relationship, one of attraction and respect, but also of challenges and tensions. As Emily left dinner that evening, she felt their bond had reached a new level. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she knew now she could no longer deny what was beginning to blossom between them, an unexpected, passionate, and inevitable romance. Emily and Alexander's relationship seemed to be progressing smoothly, but reality began to set in. Their accidental marriage, though now tinged with attraction and complicity, was attracting attention. The media quickly seized on it, transforming their private life into a public spectacle. One morning, Emily read in a newspaper an article titled, "The Billionaire Surprise Wedding, Love at First Sight or Strategic Calculation?" Photos of her and Alexander, smiling but slightly uncomfortable, were everywhere. She felt a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "How did they find these photos?" she whispered. Alexander, when she told him about it, remained calm. "Emily, this world is never private. But we can handle this together. Don't let these rumors define who we are." Despite his reassuring words, Emily felt a distance growing. External pressure, the opinions of others, and the fear of not measuring up in this world of luxury and power began to sow seeds of doubt. She wondered if she was truly capable of standing up to the expectations and public scrutiny. Then, one evening, while they were having a quiet dinner, a former associate of Alexander's made an ambiguous remark about their marriage. "A rushed marriage, but I guess you know what you're doing, Alexander." His smirk and insinuating tone were enough to cause palpable tension. Emily felt a pang of jealousy and incomprehension. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Alexander took her hand and looked her straight in the eyes. "Emily, ignore these insinuations. Nothing and no one can change what we are starting to build." Despite his reassuring words, Emily felt vulnerable. She understood that their relationship would never be easy. Between social pressure, judgmental looks, and misunderstandings, every step would be a challenge. But at the same time, she knew she couldn't back down. Her heart and mind were now tied to Alexander, and she was ready to face these obstacles to discover what this unexpected marriage could truly become. A few weeks after the media tensions and innuendo, an unforeseen event came to test Emily and Alexander in a much more personal way. One afternoon, as Emily was returning home from a meeting with friends, she received a panicked call from her sister. "Emily, something happened with Alexander." I don't know how to tell you. Before she could react, Emily felt her heart clench. Panic and worry took over. She rushed to call Alexander, but he didn't answer. Every minute of waiting seemed like an eternity. When he finally arrived, late in the evening, his face was closed and serious. Emily. I need to talk to you, he said, visibly tense. Alexander explained that a business partner had tried to manipulate the situation to sow doubt and create a scandal, using lies to tarnish his image and theirs. He had been forced to withhold certain information to protect Emily, but this had created a misunderstanding between them. Emily felt a surge of conflicting emotions, anger, frustration, but also relief. Why didn't you trust me to understand? She asked, her voice shaking. Alexander looked down, a mixture of regret and shame in his eyes. I wanted to protect you. I thought you'd be hurt if you knew everything. But I understand now that I created a distance between us. This moment was a turning point. For the first time, Emily realized that, despite the luxury, power, and distractions, their relationship depended above all on trust and communication. They spent the night talking, revealing themselves to each other, sharing their fears and doubts. Emily realized that Alexander wasn't just the distant billionaire she'd first met, he was a man capable of vulnerability and sincerity, just like her. As they parted that evening, a new bond formed between them. Stronger, more sincere, ready to face not only external challenges but also the internal storms that might arise in their relationship. After the crisis of trust, Emily and Alexander began to grow closer in a more intimate and sincere way. Their interactions were no longer simply dictated by the surprise of their marriage or external misunderstandings, they began to discover the person behind the mask of each one. One evening, Alexander invited Emily to a private garden on the roof of his building. The city lights twinkled around them, and the atmosphere was calm, almost magical. Emily felt her heart beat in unison with excitement and apprehension. Emily, Alexander said softly, I want you to know that I never thought of you as an accident. What we have, is real. She looked at him, moved by the sincerity of his words. I'm starting to believe it too, she whispered. They sat side by side, a comfortable silence falling between them. Alexander gently took her hand in his, and Emily felt a comforting warmth fill her. It was the first time she had felt such pure tenderness, without fear or external pressure. Then, gently, Alexander leaned towards her and touched her lips with a light, almost shy kiss. Emily felt a shiver run through her body, but it wasn't just physical attraction, it was the emotional connection which made this moment so powerful. They spent the rest of the evening talking about their dreams, fears, and desires. Emily shared her personal ambitions, and Alexander confided in her fragments of his past that he had never revealed to anyone. Each word strengthened their connection, building a relationship based on trust, understanding, and a growing mutual attraction. At the end of the evening, Emily returned home with a light heart and a sweet excitement in her mind. For the first time since that accidental marriage, she felt that anything was possible, a shared future, not dictated by chance, but by a bond that grew stronger every day. As their relationship strengthened, a new obstacle arose, an external threat that could turn everything upside down. One morning, Emily received an anonymous message containing compromising photos and innuendos about Alexander's professional life. The words were clear, be careful, your marriage could ruin everything you've built. Emily felt her heart clench. Why was someone trying to interfere in their relationship? And most importantly, why attack Alexander like this? She decided not to tell him anything for the moment, not wanting to worry him unnecessarily, but fear and anxiety were everywhere with her. Later that day, Alexander noticed her concern and asked, Emily, what's going on? She hesitated, then finally showed him the message. Alexander took a moment, clearly concerned, then looked her straight in the eyes. Emily, thank you for showing me. I suspected someone was trying to sow seeds of doubt and divide us. But we won't let them win. Despite his reassuring words, Emily felt their bond was being tested like never before. She realized that, in this world of power and wealth, threats came not only from outside, but also from the misunderstandings and fear that could creep between them. For the first time, she saw Alexander in a different light, determined, protective, but also vulnerable to those who sought to harm him. They spent the evening developing a strategy to deal with this threat, strengthening their bond and mutual trust. This difficult moment marked a turning point in their relationship. Emily understood that the love between them would never be simple or ordinary. But she now knew that she was ready to face all storms by his side. Their accidental marriage, which had begun by chance, was gradually becoming a conscious union, based on respect, trust, and a deep emotional connection. After all the trials and tribulations, the accidental marriage, the misunderstandings, the media pressure, and the external threats, Emily and Alexander had learned to know, understand, and trust each other. Their relationship, which had begun as a coincidence, had become authentic and deep. That evening, Alexander invited Emily to a special place, the roof of his apartment building, transformed for the occasion into a luminous garden with garlands and candles. The city shimmered around them, but in this suspended cocoon, the outside world seemed to disappear. "Emily," Alexander said, taking her hand. "I know it all started as an accident, but I never want it to be a coincidence again. I want to choose every day to be with you, to be by your side." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Alexander, me too. Despite everything we've been through, I never felt like I had to be someone else. With you, I can just be myself." Then, in a moment filled with tenderness and sincerity, Alexander took out a small box containing a ring. "Emily Carter, will you marry me, really, this time?" Emily, her heart pounding, nodded emotionally. "Yes, Alexander. Yes." They kissed under the city lights, the wind blowing gently around them, sealing their union with a sincere promise to face all obstacles together, protect their love and build a life where chance would no longer decide their destiny. This marriage, which had started with a funny and unexpected mistake, had turned into a love story unexpected but perfect, mixing passion, complicity and trust. Emily and Alexander understood that sometimes, destiny plays out in strange ways, but that the most beautiful stories often arise from the most improbable accidents. And so their adventure, which began by chance, found its fulfillment in true love, mutual understanding, and the certainty that their bond was unshakable.